I want to share with y'all a message that I really just heard maybe like 5 or 7 minutes ago, whatever, right? But it was talking about love, and it was a really good message, man. I hadn't really thought about it before because I think a lot of us were confused as to what love really is. Um, I think so many of us, we think that it's like a feeling, that it comes and it goes, that you can fall out of love, you can fall in love, this, that, and the third. I kind of want to like attempt to describe what love is, and then help us to understand why a lot of us misunderstand it, or we use it in the wrong way, right? So the message that I heard from this awesome woman, she said that in the Bible, God does not give us a reason as to why he loves us, right? And the reason why is because when you are able to define why you love someone, it starts to become a condition. When it talks about unconditional love, it's simply just that. There is no condition to receiving that love. You just receive that love. Or there's no condition to loving someone. You just love that person. Now, this is my own personal opinion, this next part that I'm about to say. But there is a difference between, like, unconditional love in the sense of how Jesus wants us to practice it. If you read Matthew chapter 5, it gives really good examples. It's called the Beatitudes, but it gives really good examples as to how to practice love. But then there's also like the type of love that's in like an intimate relationship. Those are two different things, right? So for the sake of this video, I'll call it loving someone versus being in love with someone. Okay. So loving someone is that unconditional love. So let's say, for example, you see somebody, you're minding your own business, you're walking down the street, you see someone and they need some help. Having that love for your neighbor is saying, hey, how can I help you, right? There was a gentleman who posed the question. He said, what if Jesus was in disguise? Like, what if every person that you met was Jesus in disguise? How would you treat them? And I'm gonna be honest, when I thought about it that way, man, I all of a sudden became a lot more intentional about how I would think about certain people, how I would talk to certain people, what I would do for certain people. There's times where, someone asked me for help and it'd be a sacrifice for me to help them. And I'm like, man, I really don't want to give you this last $5 because then if I give you this $5, then I can't get myself that coffee that I wanted to get later on, but you need it more than I do. So I'm willing to sacrifice me getting this coffee today so that you can get something that you have more need of, right? So that's the kind of unconditional love that I believe Jesus wants us to practice, versus that intimate love, which requires, vulnerability. It requires a connection. It requires chemistry, trust. There are conditions to being in love with someone, right? So I don't think that's the kind of love that Jesus wants us to practice with everyone except for whoever your spouse is. All right. So back to unconditional love, though. Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, a lot of times when you practice that kind of love that Jesus wants us to practice, you may end up sacrificing something, right? And again, you can't really say like, oh, there's a reason that I love this person. There's a reason why I really like this person being in my life. The two, well, past my parents, right? The two people that I love in my life the most are my little brother and sister. And I promise you, they have done nothing to, garner that love from me. There's not any specific thing that they've done. They just simply exist. They're my siblings. I love those two. There's very little that I wouldn't do for them, right? And my little sister, she's growing up right now, and she's starting to get in that phase where she doesn't really want to hang out with me. I went from being the cool brother to being like just her annoying brother, which that's that's on her. But like, I love her, I love my little brother, and all they do is just exist. There's no reason as to why I love them. I just love them because they're just there. And there's a lot of people in my life who I couldn't tell you one specific reason as to why I love them, but I love them, right? They are part of my friend group. They are part of my family. They are people I confide in. They're people that I would, if they call me up and say, hey, I need a ride to the airport, I need a ride to the hospital, can I borrow some money from you? I'd absolutely do it with no requirement, right? When you start saying, I love someone because of this, because they do this, because they do that, because they do this, then what you unintentionally do is you start to make the love that you give dependent on how much of said trait you receive from them. So if you love someone because they're funny and one day they just stop being funny, let's say they go through something in life, right? And it takes that joy, that peace away from them, and they're not able to be as humorous as they once were, and you're no longer receiving that, you start to think, well, I'm not really getting anything out of this relationship with this person. I want to love them, but they're not giving me anything in return. So then it starts to become conditional because that's what you've been practicing. And I like to say that, love and favoritism look very similar when times are good. But love slash favoritism look very similar when times are good. But when times are tough, right? Love will stand strong, but favoritism won't, right? Love will stand strong, but that quid pro quo type of relationship won't stand strong. Because when you get to a point where, you're no longer able to get what you want out of the other person as regularly as you used to, then it affects how you see them. And when you love someone just because of who they are, because they exist, because you genuinely care for them, you're not going to be, well, I can't say you won't be tempted to leave, right? You might think about it, but at the end of the day, you're going to choose to stay with that person. You're going to choose to stand side by side with that person. You're going to choose to, help them out, intercede in whatever ways you can. And I think that if you can understand that in just a brotherly concept or a friend concept, it makes it easier when you get into the portion of being in love with someone where that's sort of kind of the expectation, like, if you're not in a relationship with someone, there's not really an expectation for you to just stand by them through every single thing that they do, because the reality is, like, being married to someone, like, you've taken a vow to stay with this person. It's what we say, till death do us part. And although we have a lot of friends and family within our lives, we also understand that life happens, and sometimes people can move away. Sometimes those friendships can end amicably, of course. I'm not saying that there's contention, but sometimes those relationships can end, and they go about their lives and you go about your life, and you may not interact as regularly. So that can happen, right? But being in love, if you're able to develop the skill of loving someone without having a specific reason why, and you get into a relationship with a man or a woman, right, that you love, then it becomes the case where you are much more prepared to stand strong when that relationship kind of gets into troubled water, when it gets to a point where, it's not as the attraction isn't as strong as it once was, because it does happen. I think that a lot of people, when they get into marriages, they're like, oh my God, when this relationship started, it was so awesome, we were going on dates, and then you settle down and you start living life, and then things happen, you get to see the flaws of the other person, and you stop looking at it with rose-colored glasses, and you start kind of second guessing yourself. But if you're able to understand that, hey, I got to learn to love this person without being able to specifically identify why I love this person, and I just love them, right? It makes it easier for you to stand by them when, things go wrong. And I've seen some great examples of that, where it's really caused me to ask myself, would I be prepared to do such a thing, to stand by someone if whatever tragedy happened to that other person was to happen to me, or some, whoever will be my future wife. There's some great examples where you hear a story of, a wife who went through such great tragedy, and she wasn't able to, do some of the things that a lot of guys would want their wives to do. And you see how the love of that man was so strong for his wife that he was able to stay with her. You see how the love of that wife for her husband was so strong that she was able to stay with him, even though maybe he wasn't able to provide for her. Maybe he wasn't able to, protect her in certain ways. So when it comes to love, we have to understand that when you start being able to identify specific reasons why you love someone, why you are with someone, it becomes conditional. And the condition is, as long as you get what you want out of it, then you'll love them. And when you no longer get it, that love will start to strain. It will start to grow weak. And I can't really call it love if that's the case. It just really becomes more of a business agreement, essentially. You give me what I want, I give you what you want, and we can live under the illusion that we're in this loving marriage, when in reality, we're just kind of taking advantage of each other, you know? But yeah, that's all I have. That's what I wanted to share with y'all. Yeah, thank you.